Hi, I'm Kristen Hodgson, IVF mom, proud women's health advocate, and co-founder of Rescripted.
And I'm Dr. Jenna Khan, a board-certified OBGYN, fertility specialist, and mom of two.
And from first period to last period, we're diving into the women's health topics that matter most, from periods and fertility to pregnancy and menopause.
Through expert interviews and candid conversations, we're empowering women to take charge of their health by expanding the discussion beyond what's typically covered in the doctor's office.
It's time to stop guessing when it comes to our health. Now let's dive in for the real science-backed info you need to be the expert in you. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to From First Period to Last Period. Hi, Jenna.
Hi, everyone.
Jenna and I were just talking offline about how much time she has left because she's a busy fertility specialist, and she was talking about some of the procedures that she has going on today. And I was like thinking about how there's so many ups and downs when you work in women's reproductive health.
For sure. I think that the highs certainly outweigh the lows. Calling someone with a positive pregnancy test is something to keep you going for like the next 100 years. That's the best part of my day. But then of course, there are cycles that don't work or miscarriages that happen. So there are the highs are highs and the lows are low.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a roller coaster of emotions, but helping people grow their families, like I can't imagine anything sweeter.
Exactly. Yeah. I feel like I was born for this. It's really, it's such an honor to be able to help women with this part of their life.
Love that. Well, we'll dive right in because I know you have to get to a procedure in a little bit. But we've got an awesome episode for you guys today. We're going to be talking all about perimenopause and her story unfiltered. Esther she sent us a voicemail all about her experience, and we'll dive into some of the signs and symptoms. Then in Own Your Health, we're going to address your questions about low libido. I think that's something that we can all relate to, whether trying to conceive or not. And then we'll talk about antidepressants and anxiety medications while trying to conceive and during pregnancy. And lastly, in Women's Health in the Wild, we're going to jump into the recent executive order on IVF and all of the nuances involved in that. So let's dive right in and listen to Esther's story. Her Story Unfiltered, raw, real, and rescripting women's health, one powerful story at a time.
Hey, I'm Esther. I live in Seattle and I'm 40. When I was 38, I was raising two young kids and building my career, but also feeling like absolute garbage. Debilitating headaches, changes in my mood and mental health, and persistent pelvic cramping that turned unbearable at certain times of the month. I started looking for answers, and over the next 6 months, I spent $3,000 and saw 7 different providers. A neurologist offered me a CT scan and antidepressants. My gyno said, "Congrats, your ultrasound is normal," and gave me some birth control. The acupuncturist offered herbs. An app told me to follow a different nutrition and exercise plan every week of the month while taking 8 supplements a day to support my cycle. A therapist tried to boost my confidence and restore my drive in 60-minute increments. And another company sent me a blood test in the mail, finally providing some insight into biomarkers that were off and giving me precision supplement suggestions and nutrition guidance to control my symptoms. Along the way, I was doing my own research, books, podcasts, and following physicians who are active on social media. It turns out my condition is something actually all of us women go through, perimenopause. But none of these providers even mentioned that word to me. And I was justifiably miffed. So I decided to become my own expert. I started a Substack called Mad Alice to share my experience and consolidate resources so other women could be more efficient with their time and money. A well-rounded perimenopause care plan requires a holistic realignment of how we eat, exercise, sleep, and manage stress to feel our best. And many of us will also benefit from hormone therapy. There just aren't enough experts, but I have hope because more are coming every day and because more options exist for women than they have ever before. A highlight of my journey is that I discovered and fell in love with rucking, or walking while carrying weight, and that has taken me on an unexpected new career path as co-founder and CEO of Carry, the first weighted vest and rucking community purpose-built for women. I like to imagine how the world will change when every woman in midlife feels full of energy, free of pain, physically strong, and cognitively sharp, and I know we can create that change together.
Oh my gosh, so impressive, Esther. I want to walk with weights. I actually fell in love with walking while I was pregnant. I kind of admittedly always thought walking was like not a real exercise, but
Really, really
I
crazy.
I love my hot girl walk, so to speak.
That was such an empowering, uplifting lifting end to that story.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm someone also who turned my pain into purpose, and it's like when you go through something so awful, you just like want to make everyone else, like no one else, go through that same thing. Um, well, so lots to unpack. I think the first thing that stood out to me was that like she was in her late 30s, which my co-founder and Abby and I were actually talking about how like we just completed our families and we both had our third IVF baby, but like now it's like because we're already in our late 30s, like we have to kind of think about that stuff already. And it's like, no, I don't want to think about
All
that.
right.
Like it's kind of the last thing that comes to your mind. But why do you think, I guess, she was like kind of written off when she went to her doctor about her symptoms?
Also, menopause before age 40 is actually like a pathological condition. It's called premature ovarian insufficiency, and it is not normal.
Oh wow.
And I guess because it's rare, maybe they just didn't think of it. So
Yeah.
the menopause is really defined as like the last menstrual period that is due to lack of ovarian function, and the average age of menopause is age 51, but
Okay.
the timing of menopause and how long this like symptomatic period lasts for, perimenopause lasts for, is different from person to person, and it's really related to genetic factors, environmental exposures, your ethnicity. Um, and so it can actually, anytime after age 40 can still be the normal time for menopause,
Mhm.
but anything before age 40 is not normal, and actually is sort of treated a little bit differently in terms of treatment. Like hormone replacement therapy is not just to give you a period back and help you with hot flashes. Like it's actually needed to help protect your heart and your bones, which are things that are really estrogen dependent. So I think that the symptoms of like fatigue and I think she was saying that she was really just wasn't feeling like yourself, are really, they're vague symptoms, and there are a lot of things that can contribute to that. And certainly like menopause before age 40 is not something that comes to mind immediately for most people. But I think this sort of circles us back to like the menstrual cycle being a vital sign to
Mhm.
help you know that something is not going right. So if your menstrual cycle is changing, the cycles are getting shorter, or they're being, you're getting irregular periods and they're becoming further and further apart. And in addition to the other symptoms that you're having, that's your first cue to be like, okay, I need to be going to my OBGYN to figure out why I'm having these problems. And in the workup for irregular periods or changing of menstrual periods, the diagnosis of premature ovarian insufficiency should make itself pretty obvious.
Okay. Yeah, actually, a lot of people Google, according to our SEO research, like, is there a test for menopause? Like, how do you know you're going through it? And so, like, there are certain levels you're saying that.
Yeah. So lack of ovarian function is because there's no more eggs left, and
Yeah.
so you can look at markers of ovarian reserve to sort of give you a sense. Like there's no level that's going to tell you, yes, you're menopausal, but there are things that can point you in that direction. If the
Mhm.
ovarian reserve is a lot lower than you would think for their age, if their FSH hormone is really, really high, that can clue you into this is menopause transition. Like a normal FSH is below 10, and when you're getting to the levels of like 30 or 40, on two different occasions to confirm that it's really real, that in and of itself, and with so like irregular periods and the really high FSH levels, that's sort of diagnostic of the premature ovarian insufficiency.
Okay, got it. And if you're over 40, like, what are some of the hallmark symptoms,
You
would you
might
say?
have hot flashes, um, vaginal dryness. Those are like the vasomotor symptoms that are the most common. Changes in your mood, decreased libido. Those are, again, most common things, but there's no test. And the definition of menopause is actually like a retrospective diagnosis, because you can't really make that until you've been without a period for a year. So you've got all these like weird
Right. Okay.
menstrual cycle irregularities. Like first the periods get shorter, the cycles get shorter in length, and then they get really long in length until you don't have a period for a year, and then you're in menopause.
Got it. Okay. So really, like, the only way you can confirm you were in perimenopause is once you're in menopause.
Yeah, yes, but there are things that you can do to help treat those symptoms, like
Yes.
hormone
Talk to me
therapy.
about HRT because I feel like there's so much skepticism from, I don't know, I feel like our parents' generation on HRT. And I feel like now that millennials are kind of approaching menopause, there's like a lot of demystifying being done and rescripting.
For sure. So a lot of that skepticism comes from that big study called the Women's Health Initiative, which actually it looked at about 80,000 women, most of which were, 10 years out from the onset of menopause. And that's not who we're talking about here. Like, they were talking about people who are entering this like perimenopausal transition. And so sort of circling back to like what we talked about a few episodes ago about birth control pills, like offering a low level of hormones to regulate the menstrual cycle, like that's something that you can try to help with your symptoms, because that little bit of estrogen and progesterone can, one, regulate your cycles and help with the the life disturbances of having your like unpredictable cycles, but
Mhm.
also the symptoms of low estrogen. And then once you've really hit that menopausal phase, hormone replacement like low dose estrogen with progesterone can be helpful for the vasomotor symptoms. Also, if like vaginal dryness is the most common, is your most common or most bothersome complaint, then like really a small amount of vaginal estrogen can help a lot as well.
And has it also been debunked that like there's long-term effects of any of those medications?
So in this population of like young women who are entering this like menopausal transition or like just newly menopausal, no, those risks are not the same.
Okay. So it's like when someone waits too long.
Yeah, so for hormone replacement therapy, you want to be on the lowest dose possible for the shortest period of time that controls your symptoms. But
Got it.
if you're taking it like very close to the onset of menopause or in this perimenopause transition, then you don't have that increased risk of breast cancer, and your stroke risk is very, very low. Own your health. Ask us anything. Your questions and expert answers, because you are your own best advocate.
Okay. That's really important for people to know. Awesome. So we know that perimenopause and menopause can cause vaginal dryness. So wanted to dive in Own Your Health. We got a ton of questions about low libido from patients young and old. So what do you typically recommend for your patients with low libido? Do fertility patients come to you with that issue?
I think that's usually not top of mind at a fertility office, but it's definitely something that I come across not infrequently. So, female sexual dysfunction, which is like sort of an overarching term, is pretty common and can exist in multiple forms, including lack of sexual desire or low libido, impaired arousal, inability to achieve an orgasm, or pain with intercourse, or a combination of multiple of these things. And it's a multifactorial problem where physical, psychological, and relationship factors are assessed equally so that a treatment plan can be tailored to the patient and their specific symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
Most patients have clinical issues that actually impact more than one aspect of their sexual function. For example, a patient complains of decreased libido. A full evaluation may also reveal issues with arousal or pain. And having multiple issues doesn't necessarily make it harder to treat, because they're all related. So improvement in one of the problems might result in improvement of another. So, like, for example, successful management of pelvic pain often improves issues with sexual desire and arousal.
Mm-hmm.
Underlying medical conditions and medications can often contribute to sexual dysfunction. Something that I see a lot is patients with depression who are on SSRIs like Zoloft can experience low libido. Not always, but they can, or issues with orgasm as a side effect. And addressing this concern with a psychiatrist, and under their management, switching to another medication can be really helpful. Another
It's important because I feel like people might not think of that as a side effect.
Yeah, so one of the more common ones to switch to specifically for the sexual dysfunction side effect of an SSRI is a medication called bupropion. So that's one to bring up.
I love bupropion. And fun fact, well, at least my GP told me it actually also helps with ADHD symptoms.
Yep,
Mhm.
exactly. These mood stabilizer medications, they often have multiple benefits.
Yeah.
And then as far as treatment goes, couples therapy or sex therapy can be really helpful. Also, if there's a concern for pelvic floor dysfunction and pain, then pelvic floor physical therapy is also a big one that I refer a lot of patients to. And then exciting also in terms of like new forms of treatment in premenopausal patients, who I'm assuming are most of our listeners, these strategies of talk therapy, sex therapy, pelvic floor physical therapy don't work. There was actually a medication for low sexual desire that was approved by the FDA a few years back, specifically for women that are premenopausal. It's called flibanserin, and studies show a modest improvement in symptoms. I've never actually prescribed this medication. Most of my patients actually do okay. One, they do okay with the pelvic floor physical therapy, and then switching up their medications. That's the most common thing that I see. And also, this medication is not intended for people who are trying to get pregnant in the
Right.
immediate future. But it's really nice to know that there's another tool in the toolbox to add if all
Yeah.
the things have failed.
Absolutely. Science has come a long way.
For sure.
And we talked in the last episode about how we can't forget the men, but like one of our top articles on rescripted.com is actually my husband can't perform during ovulation. And it's all about like how it's like stage fright essentially. I mean, erectile dysfunction is one thing, but also like sometimes there's issues because there's like a lot of pressure when you're trying to conceive to have sex like on ovulation day or right before ovulation day. So that's another interesting factor in all of this too.
Yeah, and I mean, I actually have a handful of patients with that issue where the male partner has some mental health issues and is on a variety of medications they feel really good on, but they have issues with ejaculating on command in a stressful situation. And so we do inseminations. They come in, they either freeze sperm in an ancestral stressful situation, or they're able to ejaculate at home, and they bring it in the sample, and we inseminate their patient and or their partner, and it's really a successful, helpful form of treatment.
So don't be afraid to talk to your doctor about it because there are solutions,
For
right?
sure. We uncover everything in the first visit, so address all the issues. And then I just want to also mention, and for those who are looking looking at the interwebs of low libido. For postmenopausal patients, vaginal estrogen is really like the first line uh, form of treatment. But there's also some studies on a low dose testosterone that can be helpful for arousal issues.
Mhm.
But this is really only for the postmenopausal population.
Got it. And speaking of antidepressants, I know a lot of people think that they have to go off of them when they're trying to conceive and during pregnancy. My doctors actually told me that like healthy mom is more important and that like they're generally considered safe. What's your take on that?
For sure, I'm in total agreement. I think it could be a really scary situation where someone just like stops their mood stabilizers, their medications. They go into severe depression, get pregnant, and then have complications associated with that. So, healthy mom, healthy baby. It's important to just bring up the medications that you are taking with your OBGYN.
Yeah.
So, there are some medications that are safer than others. And so, working with your OBGYN and maybe your psychiatrist about adjusting medications in rare scenarios. But
Yeah.
in most cases, like SSRIs, SNRIs are the most common
Hmm.
form of mood stabilizers and or antidepressants. And
Yeah,
those better to stay on them rather than just stop cold turkey.
totally. I being on them this time around also gave me a lot of peace of mind for postpartum because I wasn't on anything the last time I was postpartum and I really struggled. And so knowing I had that like safety net, so to speak.
For sure. And they can really be life-changing for patients, especially
Yeah.
with those who are at risk or have had postpartum depression.
Yeah, no, and they don't kick in right away. So I remember like having this like 2 week period of just being in such a bad mental space because I like got prescribed, but they hadn't, helped just yet, and I had to take care of two babies. Like it was just
Yeah, it's a
so
lot. Yeah, it
this
can take
felt
up to like
very
3 weeks for them
preventative.
to kick in.
Exactly. Well, awesome. That's really great to know. And I think as long as people have a conversation with their doctor, that's the most important thing. Women's Health in the Wild, must reads, must sees, and must tries for your wellness journey. So lastly, in Women's Health in the Wild, obviously many of you saw the news that President Trump signed a new executive order kind of expanding access, or with the hopes of expanding access to IVF in the United States. And I have to say, I think despite politics aside, like I think as a fertility patient who spent thousands of dollars like building my family, like I wanted to be really excited about it. But then, looking at, different people's opinions across the industry, like there is a lot of nuance to it because, there are other pieces of legislation out there that aren't super like pro family building. So wanted to kind of chat about like what it really means and what sort of anyone out there needs to know if they're considering IVF and like it may feel out of reach for them right now.
Yeah, so I'm so glad that we're talking about this. And, I think that increasing IVF access and affordability is something near and dear to both of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really exciting to see this as a priority for the current administration. But it's also really important to understand what this means and what it doesn't mean. Like, this isn't an executive order to make IVF cheaper, because IVF is a really expensive thing to do. It requires a lot of highly trained individuals with really specialized equipment and state-of-the-art monitoring, quality control systems that keep all the eggs and sperm and embryo safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so what this really was a call to action for policymakers to come up with a plan within 90 days to make IVF more affordable. And this is going to take some major insurance reform. Like, even in states where IVF coverage is mandated, the coverage variability is huge.
Mm-hmm.
What employers fall under this mandate and how many cycles or what dollar amount is covered. So, even IVF coverage as it is, I have patients with $10,000 of coverage, which, it covers most but not all of an IVF cycle. And I
Yeah.
have some patients with $100,000 of coverage, which, so it's just really wide variability.
And then we see all the time, people who just like genuinely have given up on the idea of building their family because they
Can't
just think
afford it.
it's
Yeah. And
so
so, yes,
unaffordable.
this opens the door, but then what else is it still going to be out of reach because the amount that they are given is still not enough?
Right. So there's a lot more details to come. We follow and work really closely with Resolve, the National Fertility Organization. We attend Advocacy Day every year. I think that's kind of like the best way to get involved is like continue to call your lawmakers and
Exactly, because how this happens is going to be how the policies are made is going to be really important. Like, are there going to be limitations on the diagnoses that they cover? What types of couples will have access? Will LGBTQ plus couples have access? And, Resolve works so hard to make sure that IVF access is available, or access is equal for all. And it's just going to be really important in the details of these policies that are presented, that everybody is included.
yeah, absolutely. But it is, like you said, nice to see IVF being on the national stage and a priority. Um, but we know that policy change takes time and there's a lot more to come. But hopefully, a piece of hopeful news.
I hope so too.
Yeah. Um, well, I think that's it for today. That was another great episode, and we'll chat next time.
See you soon.
Okay. Thanks for tuning in to From First Period to Last Period. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss any of our future conversations.
And don't forget to share this with your friends, because when it comes to women's health, we all deserve to be informed, empowered, and supported.
Still have questions? Email community@rescripted.com for a chance to have yours answered on a future episode. For more science-backed women's health content that meets you exactly where you are, head to rescripted.com or follow us on social @HelloRescripted.
We'll see you next time with more real stories and expert advice.